Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Friday, December 3rd, 2021 edition of On Iowa Politics. This week on the podcast, some city-level politics, state legislators on the move, and a Congresswoman on the march against communism. Hello, everyone. I'm Erin Murphy, the Des Moines Bureau Chief for Lee Enterprises. With me today are James Lynch of the Cedar Rapids Gazette. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Erin. It seems a little bit odd to be on this side of the good morning or good afternoon.
That's right, and we plan to make it even more comfortable and hit you with the really hard questions as we go along here. Tom Barton of the Quad City Times. Hello, Tom.
Hello, Aaron.
And Gazette columnist Todd Dorman. Good afternoon, Todd.
Good afternoon, and workers of the world unite. Representative Miller Meeks.
As a reminder, you can subscribe to the On Iowa Politics podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. First up this week, we have joked in previous podcasts that the biggest winners in redistricting may be Iowa realtors. Well, sure enough, there have been some state lawmakers on the move as they look ahead to the 2022 elections and the new districts in which they will run. Republicans sorted out their Ankeny issue this week with Jack Whitford toppling the first domino. The Senate majority will move out of his suburban Ankeny district and move into a district that covers rural northern Polk County. That includes small towns like Polk City and Alleman. So with that Ankeny Senate district open, newly elected House member Michael Busolo will run in that Senate race. And that cleared the way for Marvis Landon to announce she will run in the House district that covers the north side of Ankeny. Marvis Landon is the wife of former state representative John Landon, who passed away from cancer earlier this year. So has everybody got that? The quiz is later today. Make sure you're ready. James, this obviously starts with Whitford. What does it say to you that the Senate majority leader is moving into a new district? Did he make a political calculation here, or does he just want to move closer to Papa's Pizzeria in Polk City?
Well, I don't know. The Smoothie King probably doesn't eat pizza, I'm guessing. So, but did he make a political calculation? Of course, that's what politicians do, especially when it affects the future of their political career. What does it say that he moved? First off, it says he wants to make sure that he gets reelected. If the new district looks like an easier lift, that frees him up to campaign for others, including Michael, or now that he's just a common person, Mike Busolo, who will run in that Senate district. It also says he can use the funds that he raises as majority leader to help others rather than spending a lot of it to get himself reelected. I think it also says that Whitford is concerned that his district might not be as red or Republican as it once was. We've seen a lot of sort of gradual shifting in those suburban districts from red to blue. It's not. I mean, from a Republican perspective, that district isn't a lost cause. Busolo may do very well there. And I guess if you want to go even farther out on the political limb, it might say that Whitford, who once promised no more than 2 terms in the Iowa legislature, is looking ahead to some future higher political office, Congress, U.S. Senate, governor, take your pick.
I was just going to say, you can't make the transition to governor if you're not still the Senate majority leader. You can't as easily. Anyways, I guess I don't know if Des Moines University has a presidency position open for him like they did for Terry Branstad in between stints. But I think you raised such a huge point there, James. So just to double down on that if Whitford stays in that district, he probably wins. It gets a little tougher. He probably wins, but he'll have to work for it. And I don't mean that from a Jack Whitford doesn't want to work hard standpoint. I mean from the standpoint you talked about. He's got to spend all his money on making sure he gets reelected. Whereas, like you said, he moves into this district, it's a little safer. He can put that money towards helping other members get elected instead. Another noteworthy move I wanted to talk about came in Des Moines, where Democratic Senator Sarah Trone Garrett moved into a district to face Republican Senate President Jake Chapman. So the district we're talking about covers the western edge of the Des Moines metro area, including Waukee, Adel, parts of Clive. I believe, James, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe redistricting drew Sarah Trone Garrett into a district with another Democrat, so that solves a primary problem, but it is a move into a district with a strong Republican incumbent. So this seems kind of like a bold move by the Democrats with an incumbent moving to face a Republican in leadership. Of course, I often joke that there's a fine line between bravery and foolishness. On which side of that line are the Democrats falling here?
Uh, I'm not sure on that one, but you know the timing of Tron Garriott's move was interesting to me because I saw the announcement the day after Democrats called Whitmer a hypocrite for moving into a new district, and, and I guess that's just why we love politics so much.
Right.
Brave or foolish, hard to say. If she stayed put, she would face a Senator Claire Celsey in a primary. Celsey is a more senior member of the Democratic caucus. Running against Senate President Jake Chapman is risky, but she will get a ton of money from blue state Democrats who love the storyline here. A progressive Democratic woman is challenging this radical right GOP leader. The checks will write themselves for that campaign. And of course, we don't know that Chapman is running in that district. He could pull a Hagen out by moving to a safer seat.
That's true.
And I don't think this is going to be the last move we see by legislators. I was talking to Representative Dennis Cahoon the other day down in Burlington, who's the most senior member of the Iowa legislature, and he told me he's moving into a new district that is 86% of his current district. So he's he's saying he's basically moving into his district. So we'll probably see more of these moves before it's all over.
Yeah, and I should point out, if it does wind up being Tron Garriott versus Chapman, it's not like that's a lost cause districts for Democrats. That's another one of those areas, sort of like Ankeny, right, where it's gotten a little more blue in recent cycles.
Right, and it would be quite a contrast between those two candidates if it's Tron Garriott and Chapman. In terms of their political, where they're at on the political spectrum, it's quite a choice.
They'll be able to draw the fault lines pretty easily there. All right. Well, we'll keep track of all these moves and potential matchups, and I'm sure have more to talk about on future podcasts. Moving on here, we had some interesting mayoral election results this past week, particularly in our Cedars, both Falls and Rapids. Let's start in Cedar Falls, where Rob Green earned a second two-year term by winning a runoff election by just shy of 100 votes. So obviously a very close outcome there. A runoff mayoral election in Cedar Rapids was not quite so close. Over there, Tiffany O'Donnell routed Amara Andrews, earning more than 2/3 of that runoff vote. The incumbent mayor, Brad Hart, didn't survive the initial election. So, Todd, tell us a little bit more about that process there and why, after such a competitive initial election, was this runoff so lopsided?
Well, I mean, you had basically a three-person general election race, and Brad Hart finished third by a pretty narrow margin. He endorsed Tiffany O'Donnell then, and so I suppose some of his voters may have gone that direction. There were about 6,000 fewer voters in the runoff than had been in the general election. O'Donnell collected more votes than she had gotten in the general election, and Amara Andrews received fewer. And O'Donnell actually won the absentee balloting, which was also a flip. Andrews had won it in the general election. So, that mathematics, I guess, with one candidate fewer and those shifts, I mean, that's how O'Donnell built up the big lead. I mean, the partisanship was sort of the big issue in the campaign. Andrews ran as a pretty unabashed progressive, got endorsed by a lot of Democratic legislators and office holders of the local area. She got the help of Democratic strategists and, raised money through Act Blue and all of those things. And she was criticized for that by O'Donnell's campaign. Andrews also got into some problems. There were questions about her personal finances regarding a home builder in Illinois who she still owed money. Her family still owed money for a loan or for a house that they had built. And then there was a weird chapter when some local Democrats formed a PAC to send out mailers tying Tiffany O'Donnell to Donald Trump and Kim Reynolds and Ashley Hinson, and the Andrews campaign said they at first said they didn't know anything about the group, but then it turned out that it was on their disclosure that they'd given the group $9,000. So
Whoops.
you just go around giving $9,000 to groups you don't know about. So those happened late in the general election campaign and tripped her up. O'Donnell, played the neutral card and said she belongs to the party of Cedar Rapids. She also belongs to the Republican Party, and got plenty of help from Republican operatives and consulting firms and advertisers and call centers. And it was, hard not to notice that some Republicans on social media were pretty excited
Right.
about her victory. And I've seen it thrown around in the days since as proof that Iowa is becoming redder somehow, because Cedar Rapids just elected a Republican 2-1 over a progressive, but it was probably more complicated than that. And Cedar Rapids has a history of electing these sort of center-right mayors: Ron Corbett, Paul Pate, Lee Clancy when she was a Republican, Brad Hart's a Republican. So in a way, it was about what you'd expect based on watching previous Cedar Rapids mayoral elections. I think Andrews looked at the voter registration and thought, Democratic town, she could run a Democratic message campaign, but that didn't work out.
If nothing else, Todd, it seems like this was a ringing endorsement of the status quo in Cedar Rapids.
I mean, O'Donnell is not coming out with a lot of radical ideas. I mean, downtown development, let's get a casino, let's get some housing, let's, all of those sort of things that most candidates here talk about are the needs for the city. And actually, Andrews' campaign, for all of its sort of help from progressives, was not all that much. She wanted to emphasize, she'd been one of the leaders of the social justice movement in the city last year that got a police review board and protested after the George Floyd killing. And so she had those components of her platform, but she also wanted, development, housing, all of those things, finish the derecho recovery, all of that stuff that were issues here. So, I mean, we've got a pro-business, pro-development mayor coming in next year, and we have one going out. So it's not exactly we're not bracing for big change.
Yeah. All right. Very interesting. Moving on now, we've done state and local. Let's do some national Iowa politics next. Congresswoman Marionette Miller Meeks, Republican from Ottumwa in eastern Iowa's 2nd District, this week announced her support for federal legislation that would, and I quote, aid high schools in developing curriculum to teach students about the dangers of communism and totalitarianism, I apologize, and how they are contrary to the founding principles of freedom and democracy in the United States. End mouthful of a quote. Tom, you covered this story. Tell us a little bit more about this, including, I'm curious whether the legislation supported by Representative Miller Meeks also includes any curriculum about 1950s U.S. Senator Joe McCarthy. And I ask for no specific reason.
Yeah, so Miller Meeks joined a group of House Republicans to introduce a bill that would promote school curriculum decrying communism. She said at a press conference Thursday on Capitol Hill, quote, "In our school system, we talk eloquently about the excesses and the demerits of capitalism, but we never talk about the excesses, the brutality, and the murder by communist regimes and why they have continued to fail. And if we're going to have critical thinking in our young adults and in our citizens, they have to be taught both points of view, and we must ensure that our next generation is well educated in the dangers of this radical ideology." So as you mentioned, Erin, the bill would aid high schools in developing curriculum to teach students about the evils of communism. Bill sponsor, Congresswoman Maria Salazar, Republican from Florida, and the daughter of Cuban immigrants, said that, quote, "Unfortunately, today we're seeing an alarming shift in our national conscience. So her office claimed, citing 2020 polling from the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, that once broadly rejected as un-American and a dangerous ideology, that communism is increasingly accepted, especially by the youngest generation. And so the 2020 report from the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation found that 18% of members of Generation Z and 13% of millennials think communism is a fairer system than capitalism and deserved consideration in America. And 30% of Gen Z had a favorable view of Marxism, up 6% from 2019, compared to 27% of millennials, which was down 9% from 2019. It's worth noting that the federal legislation is not an educational mandate, but rather would provide materials through that Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation for states and local educators to use to teach true evil, to teach students about the true evils of communism, according to Salazar's office. The bill also includes the development of a portraits and patriotism series of personal stories from immigrants who fled communist regimes. The bill closely mirrors one signed into law this summer by Florida Republican Governor Ron DeSantis, requiring the state's public high schools teach that, again, communism and totalitarian governments are evil. Critics have questioned the necessity, of such legislation, noting lessons on communism and other forms of political and economic systems are already part of public school curricula, and argue this is part of a broader conservative movement against academic freedom in classrooms. They note that the new Florida law came just days after the Florida Board of Education, at the urging of DeSantis, moved to ban the teaching of critical race theory. Republicans have often criticized universities for promoting liberal ideology. DeSantis said parents worry that when they send their children to universities that they'll become indoctrinated. Critics of this, as you mentioned, Erin, worry that this legislation amounts to McCarthyism, and they question whether the curriculum would include lessons about how paranoia in the early 1950s over subversive communist influence in U.S. institutions, led to the interrogation, persecution, and ruined reputations of hundreds of innocent Americans believed to be communist sympathizers based on damaging and unsubstantiated accusations. Democrats and some educators say that, the bill is another Republican dog whistle and that federal lawmakers shouldn't be dabbling in curriculum, and rather schools should just teach students the history of capitalism and communism and let students form their own opinion.
Yeah, and I tell you, Tom, as you described that, I at the very least appreciate the polling number and the inclusion about the numbers on the younger people and their opinions on communism, because I was prepared to come here today and say I don't remember walking home from school any day at any point and thinking, wow, that communism sounds like a lot of fun. But I'm Gen X, so I guess that's why.
Although, geez, if all the Marxists I knew in college, I don't know what happened to them. They obviously didn't take over the country. I mean, it's like,
no, I just moved to Iowa City.
Walk around in their Russian army coats and stuff like that. They thought they were pretty cool.
Maybe we should be nervous though if you don't know what's become of them. Where are they?
I think, comrades, I think my dog has caught a communist infiltrating my yard.
My question is, shouldn't sort of this whole lesson be, American history and government classes, the social studies, all that stuff, be delivering this message about the differences between our form of government economic system and others, and rather than indoctrinate kids like the commies do, shouldn't the education present the facts so those students can use their critical thinking to draw their own conclusions?
And that's the exact argument that spokeswoman from the Iowa State Education Association made is, look, Iowa has robust curriculum standards, that focus on, critical thinking. And those standards are developed by professionals in the field. Let's leave it to them and not lawmakers to do that. And also, is this really something that is important that we need to be focusing on? There are larger, more important issues that we need to be addressing and focusing on in education. And the dangers of communism. Is that really a concern, or again, as Democrats argue, is this just a Republican dog whistle?
Isn't the fact that the students in Iowa are saying the Pledge of Allegiance every day enough to?
Yeah, well, it's all politics. I mean, the more they can talk about socialism and communism, because that's how they're trying to paint every Democratic candidate. I mean, this is just, hey, this is terrible. Oh, and my opponent is a socialist. So, I mean, that's kind of the gist. It's, a child tax credit is, it's the same as putting people in gulags.
It sort of rings to me similar to, we're hearing more and more people and even some legislators talking about certain books and libraries and that they should be banned. And my thought is, boy, the government and politically elected official deciding what books our kids read, what could go wrong there?
Yeah, I kind of think that's the sort of stuff that communist, totalitarian governments generally try to do.
Ironically,
I'd like to offer a friendly amendment on this bill. Just change it to aid high schools in developing curriculum to teach students about the dangers of Democrats.
Yeah.
Well, I beat around the bush, right?
I mean, get to the point.
And the unknown benefits of a one-party state.
Yeah.
That's not communist, by the way.
All right. Before we sign off, I remembered that I forgot to ask one more thing going back to our first discussion about legislators on the move. I wanted to give Amy and Tom a real quick opportunity. We talked about folks in the Des Moines area, and obviously this is happening all over. Just real quick before we sign off, gang, Tom, is there any of that kind of movement happening in the Quad Cities? Folks, shipping districts to avoid a primary or find an open seat district or any of that kind of stuff?
Yep, some. So Republican State Representative Mark, and I'm going to butcher the last name, Cisneros?
Yeah.
Close enough, anyways. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, of Muscatine, announced that he's going to run for the newly drawn Iowa House District 96. So he was drawn just outside the majority of his current Iowa House District 91. But redistricting placed him in the new House District 95, which includes one township in his current district, the one that he lives in, and then extends south to the city limits of Burlington. That would have set up a potential contested primary with State Representative David Kerr of Morning Sun, and a possible general election matchup against incumbent Democratic State Representative Dennis Cahoon. Whereas the new Iowa House District 96 is an open seat. It doesn't have an incumbent, and it includes most of the population of his current district. Iowa State Representatives, Democrats Cindy Winkler and Monica Kurth, who live in the western part of Davenport, were drawn into the same district. While she's not moving, Winkler announced that she will seek election to the new Iowa Senate District 49 seat, which is an open seat. That new Senate district includes most of the city of Davenport and continues to the Scott County border. And then to wrap up, we've also seen a retirement as a result of redistricting. Scott County Republican state lawmaker Ross Poston of Walcott announced that he will not seek re-election and will retire from the Iowa House after serving out his current term through 2022. Both Poston and Republican State Representative Bobby Kaufman of Wilton, chairman of the House State Government Committee, were drawn into the same district. I'm not aware, and someone please correct me if he has, but I'm not aware that Kaufman has announced his reelection plans, but is expected to seek reelection representing the new House District 82, which includes Cedar County as well as parts of Muscatine and Scott counties.
Yeah, I believe he's running.
Yep.
Kaufman is running.
Okay. I mean, it seemed like that was pretty much kind of a foregone conclusion, but I didn't know if there was any formal announcement.
And Tom, we were watching for Robbie Smith, and now the name of the Democrat is escaping me. Where possibly
Jim Lycum.
Yeah. So are they still on target to have to face each other, or what's happening there?
To my knowledge, as far as I know, they have not publicly declared their future plans.
Okay.
So as you mentioned, Jim Lycum and then Davenport Republican Iowa State Senator Robbie Smith, they were drawn into the same Senate district that stretches from Northwest Davenport to West Branch and includes rural Cedar County. Again, to my knowledge, neither have publicly declared or announced their plans.
Okay. Yeah, that'll be interesting to watch it. And I guess in Cedar Rapids, Marion, James, anything getting shuffled around there?
I don't think anybody's moving.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, to run, there are some people who are sort of running in different districts, but they're not relocating.
All right. Well, like I said, we'll keep an eye on that and all the goings on, and have all that and more to talk about in future On Iowa Politics podcasts. We hope you enjoyed today's edition. Thank you for listening. If you like the show, subscribe and tell a friend. And you can send fan mail to podcasts@thegazette.com. And don't forget, the work of everyone you hear today can be found on the pages and websites of the Quad City Times, Waterloo-Cedar Falls Courier, Sioux City Journal, Mason City Globe Gazette, Muscatine Journal, Council Bluffs Daily Nonpareil, and Cedar Rapids Gazette. Scarlet Runner will play us out this weekend. If you know a talented band or Iowa musician who should be featured on our shows, send us a sound file. For James, Tom, Todd, and our producer, Stephen, I'm Erin Murphy. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Road is my religion. Some will be my guide in the outer atmosphere. I got nowhere left to hide. And I'll keep on growing till my fuel runs dry, and I'll keep on going till the